What's up, Hokie Nation, and welcome into a little substitute video on this Friday morning. Hysier Miller is no longer with the Virginia Tech men's basketball program, and we're going to break it all down here on Tech Sideline. So let's introduce everybody. To my right is lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way is our managing editor David Cunningham. Nick Brown is producing behind the scenes, and I am your host, Carter Hill. Guys, very interesting circumstances. Hysier Miller is no longer with the program. What do we know?
We know that there are alleged gambling allegations at Temple, and apparently he's caught up in them. And again, I want to make it very clear that we're not saying that he did anything, but the fact that he's been released from the program is an indicator that he's probably been found guilty by the NCAA. And because you can't keep a player on your roster and then play him and then find out later, oh, we have to forfeit all those games because we had an ineligible player. And, you know, the main game in question was a March 7th game against UAB, in which the line opened at UAB favored by 1 and then immediately jumped up to 8.5, just like that. And that there are watchdog organizations that monitor gambling and things like that, and that was a major red flag for them. And then Temple lost that game by 28 points. And Miller had 9 points, no assists, 3 turnovers, 3 of 9 from the field. 10 days later, Temple played UAB for the conference title, and he had 32 points, 9 of 18 shooting, 6 assists, 5 rebounds, 3 steals. That's not a definite that he did anything, but it's some red flags, and also is a red flag that Temple, historically a solid basketball program, at some point during the season lost 10 games in a row, which is just almost impossible to do for a program of that caliber. So it's a situation that is unfortunate, and now Virginia Tech's going to be without their projected starting point guard. And again, we're not saying he definitely did anything. I mean, it's not me making the accusation here, but I know people want to know why he's not in the program anymore, and that's why.
Yeah, that's everything we know. Miller averaged about 16 points per game at Temple last year, transfers to Virginia Tech in April, and the stuff came out. I mean, it was talked about a little bit back in March.
There's 1 or 2 articles,
but I don't think it was this big deal. And honestly, I mean, I didn't have any clue about it.
I think I remember reading the article when it first happened, but it doesn't register in your mind.
Well, clearly he wasn't named as part of that situation.
No, they didn't name any names.
No, it was kind of just, hey, we're looking into this kind of thing, because you have to. Like Chris said, people red flag it, like gambling people red flag it and go, hey, we need to look into this, and so Tech adds him in April, and and this is like from Virginia Tech's perspective, if people are going, well, why is this coming out right before the season? It's because Virginia Tech had no idea. I mean, the Hokies rolled him out for Media Day a couple weeks ago. We talked to him.
Yeah.
I believe the last question Mike Young was asked about Hysier Miller was at Media Day by David Teal. It was the day after the Hokies scrimmaged Liberty, and he asked Mike Young about Hysier Miller, and Mike gave a great response and just said, he's looked pretty good in practice and whatnot. From everything we were told, he's been, in and out of practice, and it sounds like they were hoping to get the situation resolved. But if it is this bigger situation, which it appears to be, and Pat Forty of Sports Illustrated had kind of painted the picture of, hey, there weren't any superstars on either one of these teams. Usually you have that type of line swing when a superstar sits out or something like that. Well, Miller's Temple's best player last year. So it's like, where is that coming from? Again, not accusing Miller of anything, but there is obviously a reason why Virginia Tech basically released him from the program. So obviously disappointing, and it comes less than 2 weeks right before the season. That's 2 times in as many years the Hokies have lost what should have been a very important backcourt piece right before the season tips off.
And I'll also point out that a lot of these investigations, they're very private.
Sure.
None of the details come out. Like, the FBI is involved in investigations like that. So it's not like you can go out there and just request the records from the NCAA if you're Mike Young and figure out everything that's going on. I mean, you have to take you have to do a little bit of vetting and then take the player at his word. But like the problem with portal recruiting is you don't have time to vet anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you get to know high school recruits over the course of a year or two when you recruit them. But when you're trying to rebuild your whole roster like Mike Young was doing last year, and you've got a month to vet the guys that you're recruiting, I mean, it becomes very, very difficult. Maybe could have been more conservative and said, we're just not going to take a chance on a Temple player. But at the same time, like when Hysier Miller committed to Virginia Tech, I didn't think anything of it. I thought, okay, here's an experienced point guard. Yeah. You wouldn't think anything. You don't have any nefarious thoughts per se.
Absolutely. And I mean, how often has this kind of come up in a betting scandal come up in college basketball? I was talking to a friend about it, and he brought up, I guess that there was in the late 70s, there was like 78, 79, Boston College was involved.
Yeah.
There was like something tied to the mob.
Didn't Carolina have a situation in the 50s or something?
Maybe. BC also had something with football, like in the mid 90s.
That's right.
But it seems very rare and very one-off, right? And I'm trying to put myself in Mike Young's shoes.
Sure.
How many times do you think he's had to walk into a conversation trying to pitch a recruit? You think in the back of his mind, he's thinking, man, I wonder if this kid was involved in a gambling scandal, right? Like, it just doesn't happen.
He probably met Hysier Miller once in person before Miller committed to Virginia Tech. He may or may not have met Hysier Miller's parents. I mean, he may or may not, probably not, have a previous relationship with the high school coach and AAU coach. It's just that's what you get into with portal type stuff.
But the last part of that equation is, and this is something somebody pointed out on the boards too. If you're Mike Young, you're going to talk to the Temple head coach, other people around. How many people are not going to praise the kid, right? Like, if you go talk to the Temple coach, maybe college coaches are a little bit more honest, but if you go talk to other people that have been around a certain player, the chances are they're likely going to talk this kid up and say, oh yeah, this kid's great, blah, because they don't want to burn bridges, right? So it's like, how much are you really getting the truth? I think in a lot of cases in the portal, it's you don't know what the kid actually is until they step on campus and you really get a sense.
Sure. Oh, and to your point too, Chris, again, if what is being alleged has some truth to it, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that he did not play in a game at Virginia Tech.
First of all, if he gets suspended, which seems like is probably going to happen, you'd have to forfeit games that he played in. Yeah. And second of all, you run the risk of the same thing happening at Virginia Tech, and that would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? I think going back to the whole vetting process, remember, I think the original article came out March 8th. I mean, he was in the portal like 2 weeks later and then committed to Virginia Tech in April. The FBI's involved. Like, it's possible like that the Temple head coach didn't even know which players were being investigated.
Exactly.
So I don't think a lot of the information, I don't think 95% of the information came to light until fairly recently when the investigation got into its latter stages. So you can vet all you want unless you have incredible sources with the FBI and those people are willing to violate FBI protocol and tell you exactly what's going on, then you're probably not going to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not exactly like you're talking to this coach's brother getting the scoop on it. Yeah. So the thing about Virginia Tech now on the floor, obviously Miller was going to be a key contributor. It is always tough to lose a key contributor. Where I would argue they're in more trouble, David, is where's the depth? They don't have like any of that now. It's Brandon Rechsteiner and maybe Ben Hammond, maybe, and that's a big maybe.
Yeah, man, I think Ben Hammond, I mean, he's going to play.
He's going to have to now.
He's going to have to play. I mean, I had heard that Hammond, was showing flashes in practice. He's a speedy guy. He comes from Paul VI, which is obviously a pretty well-renowned program.
Green.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of a little bit under-recruited. Most Paul VI kids are like the best of the best, right? And he was, I believe, like a captain and a 2-time state champion and whatnot. And he was kind of the point guard that made that engine go. And he's just 5'11" and a little undersized. And I think he's going to be a good fit. I'm excited to see him in action. At the same time, it's him and Brandon Rechsteiner now, and there's not much experience. And that's the worrying part. Now, obviously, Brandon Rechsteiner has a year in the Mike Young system and kind of knows, I guess, what he's supposed to be doing. But you can't trade game action. You can't trade that experience, those games played. That's what Miller had. That's what Sean Padula had. That's what Storm Murphy had. And we've seen Tech's point guard play, kind of fluctuate and go up and down. Mike Young, I think one of the most frustrating things for Mike Young might be the last 2 years he's talked about, man, I need to get my point guard off the court more. Man, I need to get my point guard off the court more, right? Sean Padula played like 35 minutes 2 years ago and went down a little bit. You might have to see another situation like last year where you've got a guy like MJ Collins spelling a point guard at times, just handling the ball a little bit. It all kind of depends on how comfortable Mike Young is with those guys. I've heard good things about Rechsteiner. It seems like he's playing very well. He obviously can shoot the ball very well. It's kind of just limiting those turnovers. We saw a lot of kind of unforced errors from him, I think, at times last year. But yeah, this is a very, very interesting spot. Obviously, a little bit of wrench in the plans for the Hokies.
The toughest break, too, and this is not Mike Young's fault, but you didn't essentially find your replacement for Sean Padula now. I mean, you are bringing back who you are going to bring in to play point guard this year. I think that's the toughest break for Mike Young and crew.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it changes everybody else's minutes. So if Rechsteiner was going to be a 12 to 15 minute a game guy, well, now he's going to be a 25 to 30 minute a game guy, maybe more depending on the progression of Hammond. Do you go, the emergency point guard, like if Hammond proves, he's not ready, if he's kind of like Rechsteiner last year and is not ready to play major minutes, who's your emergency point guard? Last year you could put Hunter Couture there. You could put MJ Collins there to a certain extent. Who would it be this year? Because the rest of the backcourt is new too, for the most part. Probably Jaden Shoot, but I don't know that for a fact. Mike Young said he was also considering playing Rechsteiner off the ball a little bit just to get as better a shooter.
That's not
I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think that's going to happen very much, if at all. Right. So it just impacts a lot of plans.
How does this affect the Hokies' outlook this season? They were picked 14th in the ACC. Remember, only the top 15 make the ACC tournament.
Yeah.
How does this affect their outlook? It's tough, I know. But.
Yeah, I picked the Hokies 11th, and I think to kind of explain probably where a lot of the media is coming from. They probably look at this team and go, of course, before this came out, they probably look at this and go, okay, I don't really know anybody on this team, and doesn't look like they really have a ton of impact guys coming in. I'll probably pick them lower, right? Now, knowing Mike Young, knowing this team, I felt like this was like an 11th or 12th place team. I felt like the Hokies would be a little bit better than people thought. This is going to be tough now. I mean, there's talent there for sure, but Mike Young basically, like, Brandon Rechsteiner has to come along quickly. Like, he has to be the guy now. He can't afford to make mistakes. He has to be a guy you're able to trust. And I think the tough part is, that was two guards now, essentially, that Tech went after in the portal. Jordan Ivy Curry being the other one. That Tech swung and missed, or swung, hit, and then the situation unraveled. It totally changes Tech's outlook, I think. And you talk about it's an 18-team league now, and only 15 teams make the tournament. I would still expect Tech to make it, but it might be close. I mean,
Stanford and Cal are really bad.
Yes.
Just like football.
Correct.
Go ACC realignment.
Great additions to the ACC.
I think SMU is going to be pretty good. SMU is Andy Enfield now. I don't know if you knew that.
I don't think BC is going to be very good.
No,
that's probably your bottom three. Right
they lost everybody.
I picked Boston.
Florida State's not going to be very good.
The bottom four I picked. Boston College dead last. I think Stanford 17th, Florida State 16th, and Cal 15th. Cal should be a little bit better. Florida State and Leonard Hamilton, they've got Jameer Watkins, but that's kind of it. Stanford is in, and Boston College lost like its top 6 scorers from last year, so and didn't bring a whole lot in. So, but this is it becomes all the more important now that you win non-conference games.
Yeah.
Like this non-conference slate, you have to go out and try to get 9-10 wins, because the bottom line is, who knows what your team is going to look like come, ACC play come January, February. Like, you're telling me Virginia Tech's second ACC game is at Duke on New Year's Eve? I mean, that's what Brandon Rechsteiner, he's a sophomore point guard with 20-ish, 25 games under his belt, and he has to lead Virginia Tech into Cameron Indoor. Like, those are the types of games the Hokies are going to have to play. And it's not, hey, don't give them any chance, but it's just they're in a much more difficult situation now.
I'm concerned about defense. So, we wanted to get more athletic. We wanted to be a little bit better defensively.
And Miller was supposed to improve
His own ball defense was supposed to be an improvement. The additions of him and Lawal were supposed to really help this team from a defensive standpoint. Well, now 50% of those guys are gone. So how does that affect the Hokies on the defensive end? Because they have to be better defensively this year than they were last year, because they're not going to be quite as good offensively, I don't think. So they had to be better defensively, and I think this impacts that.
Yeah, I think Miller was kind of going to be that stopper in the backcourt of just a guy who could kind of lock the other point guard down at times if needed. And now you're looking at a guy like Rechsteiner, who a little unproven. Both he and Hammond are a little undersized. They're going to have to be able to hold their own, at least hold their own in some of those battles. I mean, they're going to be playing guys like R.J. Davis, right? Like, these are ACC matchups. And so I just kind of look at it and go, it's an uphill battle. I'm curious to see what Mike Young can do. It honestly, it stinks, because that's kind of, for different reasons, obviously, but that's, 2 years in a row now. The Hokies have kind of, again, had a wrench thrown in their plans right before the season.
That was pretty much out of their
timing
control.
too.
Yeah. Right.
Same time.
Literally like 12 days before the season.
Last year's was 13.
13.
No,
So
last
they're
year's
both?
was 13. This one's was 12.
Okay.
Crazy. Silver lining. Okay. There's silver lining.
Yeah.
Rechsteiner's a sophomore.
Yes.
Jaden Schutt's a sophomore. Jaden Young's a sophomore. That's your starting backcourt this year. If those guys play halfway competent basketball this year, then you have an opportunity to have a starting backcourt together for 3 years in a row, which I think is very important for Mike Young's system. And then, if Ryan Jones shows flashes as a true freshman, and what's the power forward's name?
Tyler Johnson.
Tyler Johnson. Right. So he's apparently been very impressive so far. So there has the potential here to be a good young core if those 3 guards play well this year. I was going to
say, and don't forget, Toby Lawal has another year too.
Exactly. So if you look at the end of the season and you feel like, those 3 guards did a pretty good job this year, that was better than I expected, then you project forward and they're all 3 starters the next 2 years. That's the type of team that Mike Young wants. Get old and stay old, as he likes to say.
All right, so we're now 10 days away from Virginia Tech's season opener against Delaware State. That is in Castle Coliseum, not in McComas Hall. I don't know if you remember that.
I was going to make that joke. I think you stole it.
That is next Monday, November 4th. I know we have a basketball preview podcast coming next week, but David, particularly you, and then Chris as well, what is coming up basketball content-wise over the next 10 days?
I just had first of all, we had a women's basketball exhibition on Tuesday. And then we're recording this on Friday morning. Yesterday evening, Thursday night, we had the opportunity to go to women's basketball practice. I wrote up some thoughts after talking with Megan Duffy and some players from practice. I think we're going to do our preview podcast Wednesday of next week.
I think that's correct.
Nick's giving me a thumbs up.
By the way, we've put our preview podcast off twice while the Miller situation resolved itself. Yeah. We just didn't know what was going to happen, so we were like, nope, let's delay it a week, and let's delay it another week, and finally we're going to do it next week.
Yeah, so it'll be pretty in-depth preview podcast next week, of course. I think I'll probably write some previews next week for both teams and just kind of how it shakes out. And I'm excited, but obviously it's going to be a little bit different on both fronts this year. We're not going. I mean, this is not a top 10 in the country women's basketball team, unfortunately. And the men obviously now are going to be looking a little bit different. But the bottom line is they're two good coaches, and I think the women are going to be really, really exciting with their style of play and playing up tempo and getting out in transition. They're a fun group, and the men, Mike Young, he always, it seems like, finds a way to do more with less. So I'm curious to kind of see how he attacks this now.
And let's be honest, the chemistry on last year's men's team wasn't good, and they needed a reset there. We got the reset. We prefer to have it with the Hysier Miller whose head is in the game and not gambling on basketball, but it is what it is. We needed, the Hokies needed a reset. I mean, Mike Young said that, back in an interview in the spring. He was basically like, y'all know that couldn't continue like it was.
I believe he told David Teal that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is an opportunity to, like Chris said, to start fresh. And the good news is that Brandon Recksteiner is your future at point guard. And the guy behind him is also, right? So it's like, yeah, as bad as it is to not have a veteran, and I think it probably stings, especially because Sean Padula, it wasn't like he ran out of eligibility. He just kind of left. This is an opportunity to kind of turn the page and kind of start a new era in the backcourt, because every single one of those guys, Rodney Brown Jr. too, basically every single guard is young now. There's not really anybody with a whole lot of games played under their belt. That's both a positive and a negative. You can kind of look at it in whatever light you wish.
It's all coming up next week here on TechSideline.com. Well, for Chris Coleman, David Cunningham, Nick Brown, I'm Carter Hill. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you very soon.